Hello and welcome to the Cash News Podcast, your go-to source for informative conversations about all things cash and currency. From cash security and payments technology to the cash supply chain, we're here to share insights on the issues shaping the world of cash today. Join your hosts, Tom Meehan, Shaun Ferrari, and Brad Moody as they dive into the latest trends, strategies, and technology. This is the Cash News Podcast. Now, here's Tom, Shaun, and Brad.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to this next episode of the Cash News Podcast. It's me and Brad here today. So Shaun and Brad, for those of you that aren't seeing my face, that's who I am, Shaun Ferrari. Brad Moody, welcome.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for getting this going. Let's go.
It's good to chat with everybody. Brad and I just saw each other in person this past week. We were hanging out at Currency Research's America's Cash Cycle Seminar. So it was great to see you, sir, down in Miami.
It's great to see you, and thank you. I tell you what, you guys throw in a really class act conference for sure. It was a lot of fun, and what a great audience, really captive audience. So I appreciate all the hard work you guys did.
Our pleasure as always, and thrilled to have you there. So thanks for taking the time to come down and participate. We were in Miami, and I will say, I think there is, I don't know if it was just the topics we had or I don't know what's happening this year with kind of audience trends in general, but as you say, it was a great audience. And for us, it was one of our most well-attended America's Cash Cycle seminars, not just since COVID, but like even pre-COVID. We always were in that kind of 190, 200 area. Post-COVID, it's been in the 150-ish range, and we thought that's where we were settling, and I think our final number was 209. So we were over 200. Strong attendance, and strong attendance throughout. That's kind of one of the things that resonated with me up until the end. It was a lot of people in the room. At the end, it was still, with Jay Zagorski coming out and doing his final as the final. I think that was the hook to keep people there. And it was very well received. Very well received. Yeah, very well. And I, we had, I think it was something like 99 or something like that, different organizations. So a lot of different organizations present, and I think it was close to 40 different countries. So we were looking good. And it was nice because it had a lot of the panel discussions, what's happened sometimes in the past, and Brad, you organize some events yourself, and you've emceed some, and you see this. I mean, sometimes it's hard to get good diversity, not necessarily from the typical way of we think of diversity, but from kind of like different regions, different perspectives, diversity on the panels. And this time, especially for being in America's one, I think we did pretty good in having good kind of Latin America representation within the panels and within the topics. So it was a nice kind of different way to look at it than some of the, that sometimes it can turn into a U.S. focused content, which is fine, but it didn't do that this time, so that was good.
But I really enjoyed the panels, like especially the one that you moderated with more the Latin American side and representative for AutoNation, and to understand that the cultural differences beyond the use of currency, I thought it's always a topic when you're kind of concentrated in just the North America version. It's very similar, right? But then when you hear what's going on in Peru that's different from Colombia, that's different from Argentina. I thought that was a pretty well received, and I did enjoy hearing how that works.
There's definitely, we heard that on a couple different panels where there was this kind of definitely a cultural aspect to it. And I think what I found interesting, because I didn't know the discussion was going to go there, which is always nice when it surprises me, even after having all the planning calls and putting the panels together. You never really know where it will go when it's on stage. But what was interesting on that second day was the first day we did have a lot of the cash industry up there and central banks, and we heard some things about payment trends. But then the second day, we had a little bit of a tech focused where we pushed on the digital disruptions, what was happening there. And then we had the panel you were talking about with AutoNation on it. We had retailers, we had some commercial banks from the LATAM region, and then we had more commercial banks on following that in a different session. And what I don't know, I found it interesting is there was more of a discussion of continuing to push to be efficient in your payment choice. And I know you were on a payment choice panel as well. I think it was interesting because some of the countries and some of the banks we had up there were definitely saying we're trying to push people to a more digital alternative.
Yeah.
I don't think any of them, maybe the digital focused bank went a little further, but I think the general theme wasn't try to get rid of cash, but it was more like, we're coming from countries that have a very high cash usage.
Yeah.
And there are benefits when you have that much cash being used to shifting a bit more to the digital spectrum from an efficiency, even from an inclusion standpoint.
Sure.
But it was a couple panels there where I was, by the end of the 2 hours of those two sessions, I was like, wow, that took more of a leaning into digital payments than I thought those two panels were going to go.
Well, I also noticed that, and I may be wrong, it's happened 3 times in my life, but no, I did notice that, especially with the digital payments, and not just like CBDC kind of, that I didn't really see a whole lot on that, but like even from the digital payment side, I felt like it really relied on the government of the country represented to see, because cash and currency in your hand has a much different value than the distrust of the government that's saying, hey, force to a digital. So I thought that relationship was actually, it's one of those things, in America, whichever side of the fence politically you reside on, you still have a faith in the economy. Where economies of scale, that a state in the United States is probably the GDP of most of the countries that have to deal with this stuff, and the distrust of a dictatorship kind of government. So I thought that was actually something I just never think about. I was glad to hear.
Yeah, that was interesting perspective, and I think the perspective from, again, not to single out AutoNation again, but they were kind of the retailer we had on the panel. And what struck me there was, and it's a fairly obvious point, but sometimes you just don't think of those until you hear them, right? But the nature of the business drives also what kind of payment you're looking to accept, right? And I get that, but like sometimes we just say retailers, what's going on in the retail space, and in hearing her basically saying, hey, she would, at least in her repair shop side of the business, car repair centers, right? She's like, yeah, we want to go cashless, and initially I'm kind of like, why? But then as she explained it, she's like, yeah, because it's all insurance payments. So why it goes back to that economies of scale thing. Like, why do I want to take the risk? Why do I want to put in business processes to handle cash when virtually all of my business is insurance payments?
Okay. And then I thought it was interesting. She said the converse, that they put a cap on the cash for down payment, right? It's because the days of someone walking in, I want to buy a car, doesn't matter which car, and I'm going to pay this amount of money for it. Screams anti-money laundering, right? So yeah, I thought that was a good relief that she had there. So it was very interesting.
Yeah, which was interesting on that retail purchase of a car piece, where it was like, I think there was a question that was asked from the audience that was like, would you ever go cashless on that side? And yeah, to your point, it was the opposite answer. It was basically like, no, if somebody wants to spend money with me, I'm going to let them. They might put a cap on it so they don't come in with $30,000 in cash, but for a $5,000, $6,000, $8,000 deposit or whatever you're bringing in, you want to spend money, we'll take it.
Well, and then also I think, and then I thought how she, and I don't want to, if I'm wrong, tell me. Again, this will be the 4th time. But I did also appreciate how she did. They are combating the major credit cards with
Yeah.
imposing the transaction fees to the customer now instead of absorbing that cost, because that 2, 3 to up to 5% for accepting a card, as margins are narrowing, as we all see, that adds up really quickly to scale, right? So that's going to be, I really wonder if that's going to be a consumer focus going forward. Is the utilization of cash going to be impacted for those larger items? Because if you do anything on a credit card, which a lot of people will put their down payment on a credit card for points, right? I think we see that the points bait, of wanting to do it adds up. And hey, wait a minute, I'm going to get 10,000 points for this, but that 10,000 points, I'm not going to be able to save 3% on a $10,000 down payment or 5,000, whatever that number is.
Yeah.
Now that number gets larger, and you get points that are worth one point to $1,000. So you're like, well, great. What is 5 points going to do for me on it? So I think when people start thinking of it that way, and then the accumulation of debt too. I mean, you're already taking debt to buy a car, and now you're going to take debt on top of that for that. It's no
but
bueno.
and the other interesting piece on that piece, I mean, she was talking about, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but they had done some analysis on the cost to them, right, of accepting the cash side too. So it wasn't like it was costless. She was and I think she was basically saying, say the credit card processing fees are 5%. She was passing 3% onto the customer, because cash came with like a 2% cost, if you will.
Sure, right. Of car storage,
Right. So like, okay, well, if this 2% is my baseline, I'm going to absorb that as cost of payments, right? And then above that, if you want to choose a credit card, that will go over, to you, which was interesting. It was kind of the first time I've heard anybody do the math like that in terms of like, okay.
And then if you tie that onto, again, putting my banker hat on, but then tying that into, if you have a smart safe program with provisional credit offered by the corresponding bank, then you could make interest on that to combat that fee, right? And then you lower your transportation cost from 3 days, 5 days a week to once every 2 weeks at the whatever the max, because it's not going to fill up generally.
Yeah. No, exactly. It does. Talking about different use cases, and we had plenty of smart safe and currency recycler folks there at the event, which always gets me thinking about that type of equipment and use cases around that. It does seem, and she said, so the AutoNation rep again said they don't use smart safes in their environment. I understand, as we were kind of talking about the flow of cash in there, why a recycler wouldn't make sense, because it is a very one-way.
Yeah, it's a deposit oriented.
It's deposit only scenario, right? You're not making change in a lot of these cases. But that seems like the traditional use of a smart safe would be perfect for a store like that.
Depends on that treasury product from the bank, because sometimes it's more expensive than the fees of the safe, right? And transportation. So all good stuff.
Yeah. But anyway, it gets us thinking, and the conversation was really good there and throughout different panels. I mean, the other one, you were on the payment choice panel with
Coalition,
I don't know if you want to share some thoughts on that.
So it was good with Jen Bennett from G&D and Mark Lowers from Lowers Risk Group, and I supporting Control Tech. It was great to be on that panel. Thank you for the opportunity for that. But the discussions that are going right now with legislation to get some of these things kind of addressed at the congressional level, I think are important. We've been very fortunate to understand that this is not a partisan type bill, meaning that it's the constituencies of the elected and the kind of in the United States people that either it's not an unbanked and it's not a red state issue, right? Because banks don't necessarily want the unbanked. I hate to say it, but that's maybe they don't qualify. Maybe they deal in cash, and cash is they use maybe their local pawn store as their bank, and that happens, right? You buy a product, you pawn it, and you get cash. And that's how pawn stores generally work. But then the other side of the red states, they use cash because they don't want the government to know how much they have, and so there's really as Mark Lowers has always said, there's a healthy tension that lasts between the two. And so that's what helps in not being a partisan issue of saying that, it's not a red state, it's not a blue state agenda. It's really the constituencies that are affected. But it's really great to see the momentum and then to continue on with the education portions of it as we continue to go around to various conferences and meet other people so that we all understand the purpose and the goal, right? And it's not intended to, make the armored cars and the banks better and us bag manufacturers. It's not about that. It's really about having the ability, the freedom of payment choice. It's an important value that our foundation, right? It's that choice of how we want to do things. So I appreciate the time. Jim Pettit did, I think, an excellent job in kind of leading the panel and kind of getting the conversation started for sure. But no, it's great, and we look forward to the bill going forward. Working with our folks that are doing the hard work on the Hill. It's and finding sponsorship. It's kind of hard to find sponsorship and cooperation and cooperation. Well, when the government's not working right now.
Fair enough.
But still, it doesn't stop the momentum. So.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I mean, I think, we could have a whole other conversation on kind of how Jay Zagorski finished us off with his view on cash and why it's important to use it regularly and keep the muscle memory alive. And
I did it today. I did it today. I had to buy something and I was like, I got the money in my pocket. Why not use it? And it was uncomfortable. It was weird. But it's one of those deals. It's a muscle memory, and you forget that. Remember back in the day when you went to buy gas and you paid cash, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, I've got to go in to pay cash first, and when it changed, right? So it's a good practice. I got Jay and I were in the elevator together, and we talked a little bit for 15, 20 minutes, after that and before that, and at the event that you threw afterwards. An interesting gentleman in a good way. I'll text him to say, hey, make sure you watch this podcast. But he didn't know, so I forwarded him the invite so that he can start, watching it and kind of, get engaged. But it's an important momentum, and it's again, cash is important. To be able to use the cash is important, and it helps. But I tell you one thing where it doesn't help, and this will close it out is that pesky penny.
The pesky penny. Yeah, that would have
been. I
think
we're all tired of talking about it, but it's such an important thing that I think the Fed has done a what they had to do in removing it from circulation. So people need to understand that how it's working is it's coming in from a deposit. It's not going to recirculate, right? Once it makes it back to a Fed depot. So retailers and banks have had to do some very creative things, and we saw a lot of things where it's very consumer facing. So I'm not going to name the banks because they may have been up there without permission, but the banks participated. Some big banks participated on a panel, and they were very clear with their intentions that the penny going out of circulation is costing them millions of dollars. You think, oh, it's a penny round down, right? It's if something's $3.99, they're rounding it down to $3.95. Well, who cares? It's 4 cents. Multiply that by transaction over the course of a period of time. It's millions and millions of dollars that's going to impact the banking system, the
retailers. And
the retail,
That's the two pieces there. I mean, it's generally, I think and we've done some work on this with the folks that were speaking, as well as some others, and had some workshops around this. I think for those that don't know, the Mint stopped penny production several months ago at this point, and no more are going to be produced. And I think the commercial bank and retail industry was caught off guard when it happened. They knew it was coming, but they didn't know when. They expected next year because that was the initial kind of announcement, but they decided to pull the plug a little earlier. So no one was ready for it. And in most other countries, when this is done, it is accompanied with legislation and a plan to basically communication to usually say, hey, the penny is no longer going to be produced. It will eventually be in short supply, and if the retailers, as of a certain date, retailers will not be giving you pennies, banks won't be giving them back as change, all that sort of stuff. Well, there has been none of that. So it's just basically at this point, when somebody runs out, somebody runs out.
Right.
And to your point, depending on where you are, if there are no more pennies in inventory at either the bank or at the Federal Reserve location, there won't be any more pennies. That is it. So the interesting piece around this is, without any legislation accompanying it in terms of rounding, most places have agreed, places being retailers and banks, that they have to round in the favor of the customer.
Correct.
So they to your point, you have to go to a nickel. So you can, most places have decided to round the change. So like essentially it makes it a little bit easier that your bill is still whatever your bill is, and then to give you the appropriate amount of change, they will give you the higher amount of change once rounded, right? So it's kind of one thing you have to deal with. But to your point, that then it doesn't sound like much, but we've talked to one of them was at the event. A different one has been on some work groups. Talked to a very large retailer, if not the largest retailer in the U.S. About what that's going to cost. It doesn't sound like a lot. You're like, okay, you're going to round up a couple pennies on it. No, I mean, you're literally talking tens of millions of dollars for the rest of this year, and that's only like a half year. And while that sounds like, oh well, okay, the retailer it's going to cost them $10-20 million. I hope everybody is acute enough to know that they're not going to absorb that themselves. At some point, that will be adjusted to.
Yeah, like when I was in Australia, as when I was 19, the price on the shelf is what you paid, right? Yeah. And so people think, well, just change that. Well, think of that large retailer. Every price sticker that's on every shelf of every store is all got to be updated, replaced. So there's, it's the indirect operational costs that are going to be impacted by everything as well. And this is a massive thing. So the one thing
and that's the other piece. You can't even adjust that, because then you have sales tax.
Right.
You have a local tax and a national tax. So there's no way to adjust
it's going
prices.
To be a price at the register kind of stuff, right? Yeah. So the thing that, and I think Jason from DTS did an excellent job, and when he moderated it, it's like, this is nothing. The nickel costs 14 cents to produce.
Yeah.
So for every 5-cent piece, it costs us 14 cents. What do we do when that one, hey, this is right around the corner. So, pennies are pennies, but nickels.
Yeah. Well, the nickels cause a larger problem, because not only that, you then need the nickel because the quarter ends is a 25-cent piece. So you need the nickel to.
Yeah.
So now you got a whole other set of issues. It's not. Yeah, the nickel creates a whole other world of hurt, but they're dealing with the pennies now, and it's interesting, because then from the bank's perspective, they mostly see it on the check cashing side, or one of the places they see it is on the check cashing side, right? So, again, they're rounding what they're giving to the customer in terms of up, so you get more. So if your check was whatever, if your check was 97 cents, they're going to give you $1. Okay, but
wish we could just kind of reset and do like the euro. There's a 20-cent euro, right? And it's just let's redo everything, because you're right. It impacts everything.
Yeah. So it's interesting. We'll see how that plays out. But right now, it's again, does the larger population base even know about this? Probably not, because even on those retail receipts, they had examples that we saw in some of the work groups of what it looks like. And there's a line item at the bottom. It comes down as like change due after your tax and everything else, like change back, and then it has another line that says rounding,
right,
and then your new total. The only way, there's no publication of this or anything, so the only way you're gonna even know as a consumer that your amount back was rounded is if you actually looked at your receipt and read it. And I mean, who is doing that? Very few people, especially by the time you get down to the bottom.
Well, assuming they get a receipt. Right?
Well, right. Yeah, sure.
Now everybody opts out of getting receipts, which is great.
Yeah, because you don't know. I mean, you think of your own behavior, right? Even when now they're not going to round credit card transactions, that sort of stuff. But think about when you go to the grocery store and you see what your amount is, and then you hit total, and then another number pops up. You have no idea how it went from
good faith estimate, right?
A to B, yeah. So anyway, it's interesting. I would say that if you're listening to this and you're continuing to use cash and you're getting change back, and you haven't experienced rounding yet, I would say you will. I think that was the clear message. Like, it's going to happen more and more and more frequently now, as inventories are running out all over the country. So, and then the other interesting piece is what to then do with all the pennies. That no one has answered. There is no solution to, all right, well, the banks were clear and said they would keep accepting them in deposits. That then requires somebody to order them and demand them. And as long as someone demands them, that's fine. But sooner or later, someone is going to get left holding the penny bag.
Yeah. and then as you said, what are they going to do with them? Is it there? I don't know the value if you melt them down, because it's so many different alloys, right? So who knows?
Well, and until they change the legislation, you can't even melt them down.
You can't, right? That's what I'm saying. There is nothing to do. So
it's interesting. I mean, yeah. It was, again, we had South Africa in the little workshop we had on the penny before the thing started, and somebody from the Reserve Bank of South Africa. And in addition to saying, I don't understand, why don't you guys know what you're doing with this? Why isn't there a policy? And being just shocked that this could happen in the United States. It's
just funny because when it all kind of hit the fan about 2-3 months ago, as far as shortage, my phone started ringing from people I haven't talked to in a while. I was like, hey, so and so, how you doing? Like, Brad, what's going on with this penny thing? We can't get them anymore. Can you help us? I'm like, what do you want me to do about it? Like,
I mean, I can find my piggy bank, but what do you want me to do about it? Yeah.
Like, Brad, can you find out what's going on? It was pretty fun. Right?
Yeah. But one of the interesting things she said was, in terms of what to do with them, she said, every couple years they'll do a commemorative coin series from the bank. And what they'll use is the pennies. They'll I don't know the mechanics of how you do this, but essentially they'll take their whatever coins they've removed from circulation because they've demonetized that denomination coin. They'll use those to then produce. I don't know if they remelt them. I guess they would have to, but they use that metal, those coins, to then produce a commemorative coin that they can, again, they have a commemorative coin program. It's at least something that somebody thought about, right? Yeah. And a thing they chose to do with it. So other than, the occasional penny walls of people's houses, or my coffee table's made out of pennies, that sort of thing.
I can see that happening soon. Everybody's resining pennies. That's what I need, John. I need to make a cutting board with all resin pennies.
Exactly. Yeah, just make sure you resin it and put it in something, because that'd be disgusting.
Right. Right. All right. Well,
good. Well, I feel like the penny ended the conference. That was the last session at the conference. It should be our last topic for the day here as well, I think.
Yeah, I agree. So I'll be looking forward to never talking about the penny again, because it seems I feel like I talk about it way too much now.
That's right. Well, if anybody has pennies or wants to talk more about them, let us know. We're happy to do something.
You know what? An overwhelming question I do get from people. They're like, well, should I save it because it's going to go up in value?
It'll not go up in value. Do not save it. Like,
don't save it. Like, it's like, okay, great. You got a 1941 penny. I picked a random date, right? Okay. There's a lot of them, right? So
yeah. Do not. I just think of how many pennies are out there. I mean,
what did Marianne say?
Oh God, I don't. It's an insane number. I don't even know. Something ridiculous. I mean, it was an insane number. They're not going to be worth. They're already not worth anything. They're going to be more not worth anything. A penny.
They're worth 1 cent.
Yeah, they're worth a cent. That's what they will continue to be worth. When I worked at the Fed, that people would call me with their whatever coin they thought was worth something, and I get the phone call and be like, hey, I have this quarter from, I don't know, 1872, and it looks like this. What's it worth? Like 25 cents. Bring it to a collector. Maybe it's worth something else. Bring it to a collector, but to a bank,
that's when you say
to the Fed.
I'll meet you in an alley. I'll give you $1 for that 25 cents.
Yeah, it's a quarter. It's worth a quarter. That's what it is.
Easy enough. All right, so anyway. Well, hey, it's been great catching up with you. Of course, I did see you. Was it yesterday?
No, I think it was.
Day before yesterday.
Day before yesterday. You're right. Yes.
And again, thank you to Currency Research and all the stuff you guys did. Great conference, top class. It was really, really great. And for those that aren't aware of it, it's a great networking opportunity, as well as seeing a lot of banks and hearing what's going on in the industry, as well as across the globe. It's enlightening. I think it's a value add to organizations, and you get some big banks and some smaller ones. It was a very, very, very good conference and a lot of great topics. So I appreciate all the hard work you put in that, because your next one is in the great place of
Ghana. We are going to Accra, Ghana, in a week, where we're gonna talk all about the CD and the ECD and monetary policy and stability. The 60th anniversary of the Ghanaian CD, so it's going to be a great event. I was looking at our agenda today, and it's full. Everybody's ready to go. We are. My colleague Tom Mitchell, for those of you who know him, has done a fantastic job putting that program together and pulling it together over the past few weeks. So we're super excited about it. But if you're in the U.S. and you're not planning to go over there, I will say, if you want to come to Miami with us next year, where I'm sure Brad and I will be again, it's going to be the next America's Cash Cycle Seminar will be in Miami. I think we said November 14th-ish, 17th-ish, that range, middle of November next year in Miami.
I'll tell you, there's nothing like leaving a cold weather environment where Shaun and I live to go to a nice warm Miami for a couple of days. That was nice.
That's right. Exactly. So put it on your calendars. Start making plans. We're probably going to be in a different location. We're looking at some different locations, but it'll be in Miami.
Yeah, great.
Yep.
Great.
Cool.
I appreciate it. Good deal. Well, thank you all for joining, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Cash News Podcast. We hope you found this episode insightful. Don't forget to like and review us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter, and be sure to visit us at thecashnews.com to stay up to date with the latest on the world of cash. Thanks again for listening to the Cash News Podcast.